Afternoon, Bill.
Hello, Mark. Yet again, second podcast today.
Second podcast today,
Yeah.
and in really good surroundings, I might say. Little Mallup Street and the Geelong Addy.
That's right. And this is a building, or this is a strip that's going to have part of Little Mallup that's going to have significant change, particularly with the development going on next door. There's been a lot of controversy about Market Square, as you well know, sitting on the Geelong Authority. But my memories of this region in Geelong go back too far, to 1955, when my father started Noddy Soft Drinks in Geelong.
In here, was it?
And of course, everybody in Geelong remembers that.
Yeah.
And we were just around the corner. But this was a vibrant part of Geelong in those days, and there were department stores and all sorts of things. But we've moved on from there. And today, I'm delighted that we are talking to Nadja Fleet, who is the editor of the Geelong Advertiser, which she'll tell us how old the Advertiser is. And it was a bit like when we interviewed Bay FM, which was the old 3GL.
Yep, it is.
Real sort of Geelong institutions. That's what they are.
So welcome, Nadja.
Thank you for having me.
That's all right. Our privilege and pleasure. So, Nadja, we always start our podcast with, where did you go to primary school?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't think if I gave you the name, it would mean anything to you. It was actually a small primary school in Berlin, in Germany.
Ah, okay.
I grew up on the eastern side. Was born a few years before the wall came down. So by the time I was at primary school, we were actually united. But yeah, I grew up my whole life there in very typical, those Russian block type apartments with a playground in the middle where, you played all your afternoons with your friends and on the weekends, and you walked to school by yourself and you came home by yourself, and had a very typical but happy upbringing until I went to high school and decided that I wanted to take a gap year and come to Australia, and that's where kind of the next chapter began.
Oh, wow. And good memories of your childhood?
Very good memories. Yeah, it's always very interesting. I never actually really thought of being East German as big an issue as I was made aware I came to Australia when people understood where I'm from, and they were sharing their view of how they perceived what the East must have been like. And all I remember is happy childhood. I grew up with a single mother. She was separated from my dad, but I was always in contact with my dad, so there was no issues there. I just remember playing with my friends a lot. Everything was obviously free as well in East Germany, so kids' sport was free, schools were free, so there was a lot of good parts that came with it as well. And luckily, my family probably wasn't as affected by any big separations from other families. I did have a great-grandmother who lived in West Germany, so we got a decent supply of Western goods delivered to us on a regular basis, so never really had a sense that we missed out on too much. Life was pretty good back then.
Nadja, I think you're one generation removed, of course, from the older folks, and if I may remember, in 1965 I went through Checkpoint Charlie. And of course, the East-West conflict was at its height. And, from what I saw, we just saw the dark side of things. And I was there with an American university student, and we were on assignment to comment on the museums. And I just remember the amazing museums in East Berlin in those days. But so my memories are those that are tarred in that old format. But you're in the next generation, so people don't realise, it's what we were fed in the press probably, and you're the press now, so that's good. So what sort of schooling did you do in was it a typical junior school, high school type schooling?
Yeah, it is a little bit different. So you do your junior school, your primary school to year 6. And then we have 3 different school types. So your primary school teacher will give you a recommendation which school type you should be going to based on your skills. So you have one school type that is very much designed for people who might go into trades afterwards. Then there's a bit in between, and then you've got one that's very much catering for students that will probably go on to do university. So the first 2 school types go to year 10, and the second one goes to year 13. So I did 13 years at school, always with the ambition to go to university afterwards.
And did you do that?
I did. So I did my gap year in Australia, travelled around, and as a lot of German backpackers happened to stumble across this one Aussie bloke who swept me away, and so that was it. And I had to go back home for 6 months because my travel visa ran out. But I decided to look for a university. He was in Darwin at the time, so it was Charles Darwin University for us. So that way I felt like I'm still following my dreams and can still see what happens with this relationship. And he ended up being my husband later on.
That's very nice. That's a good story. But what made you pick Australia? In East Germany, what made you say Australia's the place?
I think I was very adventurous at that time too, and I really wanted to do something different. And my older cousin, did travel around Australia for a year before as well, so I had a bit of an insight what it's like. And it just felt exciting to go as far away as I could. So
that's really good, and that's very brave, actually, coming from where you did to Australia. That's fantastic.
Mark, that's why we call this true business stories.
True business story.
Everyone's got a story.
It's fantastic.
And everyone's
story.
got a different story.
That's a fantastic story. And of course, going from Germany, which can have extremely cold winters, to Darwin, that's the other extreme. How did you handle that?
Yeah, so I ended up in Darwin for 8 years, and by the end of it, I was well and truly acclimatized. Obviously, we had only wet seasons and dry seasons, and it got a bit suppressing at times, the heat, and especially during the build-up period. But you just get used to it, and I must say, I still struggle with colder weather now.
Yep.
For some reason, that climate just really stuck to me, and I do prefer warmer weather unless I'm in the mountains snowboarding and have proper snow around me. That's a good exception.
What did you do at uni? What was your degree?
I did a Bachelor of Arts. I didn't study journalism. I studied anthropology, sociology, and politics, international relations.
And your first job out of uni?
Out of uni, it was actually at the NT News in Darwin. But my very first job back home in Germany was actually delivering newspapers.
Okay.
And then I did a whole series of weird and wacky things, especially during my backpacking years. Obviously back home I always worked. I was working in retail a lot. Anything that could earn me a bit of extra pocket money. And then while I was travelling, my first job in Sydney, in Paddington, was at an ice cream factory. So I remember in those 3 months putting on lots of weight, because it seemed to be
got to eat the product.
You've got to test it, yeah. One scoop for the customer, one for me. And I worked at an Irish pub in Darwin. I worked as a housekeeper on Great Keppel Island in Queensland. I worked at a lobster factory in Fremantle. I really...
That's a great experience.
I loved it, yeah. I really do it. And
great experience.
I feel as well, like, especially in the industry that I'm in now, to be able to relate to people, it's good to have some kind of first-hand and diverse experience.
Yeah, well, Mark, remember Xavier Prime, the farmer down at Colac?
Yep.
He was a carpenter in Colac, and he ended up working on the oil rigs in Alaska or somewhere, and off Norway, and it's just amazing what people get up to. I never cease to be amazed. The other interesting thing is that quite a few of our podcast guests started off delivering newspapers as kids. So that was a job that everyone could get in our early days.
So Northern Territory News, that was your first foray into newspapers, and the Northern Territory News is quite famous for crocodiles on the front cover. So was that going on when you were there? Was that?
Yeah, I worked my way up from a cadet to a police reporter, and part of the police rounds in the Northern Territory is covering crocodiles and cyclones and everything that comes with it. So yeah, it was an amazing experience for a young journo to be exposed to that kind of Australia. Was next level. I can't remember how many helicopter rides or small planes I took to remote communities. I remember once we were dropped off in swamps to go and collect crocodile eggs, and we were just wading through the knee-deep, or not waist-deep water really, and all we had were oars to fend off any angry mums that might be out there. And you just ride the nests and you ride back out of it and you wait for the chopper to pick you up. And I went to Asia a lot, following the ministers around, because of that close proximity, they had strong relationships with Indonesia and China and other Asian nations. And that's all stuff that I don't think I necessarily would have experienced down here. So very grateful for my time up there. But the other thing I really felt like I learned up there was, obviously we did do a lot of serious journalism as well. But I think it's really important sometimes to also learn not to take yourselves too seriously. I think in our industry we tend to do that a bit too much sometimes, and forget that we're not, the most important thing in everyone's lives all the time. But at the same time, we can't neglect the fact that we've got a very important role to play in society.
That's right. So you started off there, and you've ended up now in 2024 today in Geelong. What were the leapfrogging you did to get to Geelong?
It was a lot of leapfrogging.
Yes.
Darwin, and then Adelaide for 8 years as well at the Adelaide Advertiser, and then the Sunshine Coast, and now here.
So is that with the same group?
That's all the same group,
All
yes.
the same group. So was that a tap on the shoulder to move, or you saw opportunity and you jumped?
A bit of both.
A bit of both. Because that's a big spread. But you're obviously keen to try new things and new experiences, I suppose.
Yeah, I think, I've become a lot more aware now that the further I go in my career as well, it's one of those weird jobs where the further you go, the fewer positions are actually available that suit your skill set. So, I guess a bit of flexibility was very much required to keep on learning too. But at the same time, again, I'm very grateful that I've been able to live in all these amazing places, and in the role that I've been playing, I really get to know the place very quickly too. So it's not just travelling through and meeting a couple of locals here and there. I have to understand very quickly what the community is made of.
So on that point, talking about continuous learning, because it's something that we're passionate about, and it's, what do you do to continue, I guess, to keep the brain moving and to continue to learn all the time? Is there anything specifically, get that word out, specifically that you do on your continuous learning program?
So obviously there is the stock standard things that we do within the company, leadership programs and things like that. But I think one of the most effective aspects for me is really people, and making sure I surround myself with people that I learn from, asking questions, not just, mentors, but anyone in my life, really asking lots of questions, always be open, and never think you know it all as well. I don't think, it doesn't matter how old you are, the learning process never stops.
Well, that's probably why Mark and I are now professional mentors, because I know I am, and I'm sure Mark was, we were guilty of not listening in our young days, and we thought we knew it all. And then suddenly now as professional mentors, we know the value of having mentors in whatever form they come. And it's really important. And it's, continuous learning is, we keep pushing it all the time, Mark.
Very important. Have anyone mentored you through your journey?
I have had managers that I looked up to, and I find I work the best if I've got a good manager as well that I just know I can learn a lot from, but there haven't been any set mentors. As such, yeah. So
you landed in Geelong. What did you think when you drove down the highway or wherever you came from into Geelong?
So I remember Geelong as a backpacker as well, so that would have been 18 or close to 20 years ago. No, 20 years ago,
actually. Big change since
then,
yeah, absolutely.
And so I must admit back then I did have a bit of an industrial taste left over from Geelong at the time, and I didn't stay that long here either. It was the gateway to the Great Ocean Road, as it would have been for many people back then. But coming back, I do really love this place. Where I live as well, it's such a good community feel. Obviously, you've got all the natural aspects to it, but I've compared Geelong a lot with the Sunshine Coast in ways that it's a similar population. You've got a close proximity to another metropolitan and all that, but what the massive difference really is here is there's so much diversity here and a lot of history and resilience, and the type of industries that are here really allow a lot of young people to start their careers here without having to move to a bigger centre. And I think the city really benefits from that as well. We don't have that same brain drains that some other regional centres might experience. And what Geelong did after Alcoa and Ford and all that closed down is pretty impressive. The path forward has very much benefited the city, I think.
And it's continuing, and it's interesting. I'm pretty sure you're well aware that a lot of people in Geelong have a love-hate relationship with your newspaper, and you can be a punching bag at various times, although I think you punch back. There's no doubt about that. But just recently you've launched an initiative that is about the future of Geelong. So just can you explain a bit more about that with this project coming up, or this seminar you've got coming up?
Yeah, so we've it's the second time that we've done it. Last year we already did Future Geelong as well, and that was very much just an introduction into the market, just a bit more generic. This time we identified that Geelong has a lot going for it already, but it felt that we haven't really defined who we are. And once we do that, then we can actually start really marketing who and what Geelong is. And I think there was definitely a gap there that Geelong could delve into a little bit more. So for people within Geelong, we know what Geelong is, we know how great it is, but we haven't really nailed putting it down in one sentence kind of thing. And then I don't think we've really nailed bringing that sentiment outside of our borders as well. So the hope with Future Geelong is very much identifying what are we, what differentiates us, and how do we deliver that message outside of our borders, and then in turn attract not just public investment but private investment. I think we really need to start focusing, or we already have been focusing, but really leveraging that a lot more, because the public investment isn't always there and it doesn't always go into the areas where we most need it. And hopefully with that comes all the benefits for Geelong as well. And, you know, businesses will flourish more. We get more people coming here that bring good things with them, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation actually, because Mark and I have been involved in various committees and in groups, and Mark's been chairman of the chamber, I've been the temporary CEO of the chamber, but chaired other boards. And I wrote an article on LinkedIn the other day, I think it was LinkedIn, and spoke about I'm going to too many talk fests. So if I may play devil's advocate for a minute, there's probably a two-part question. One is that you're running this forum. It's got a very high profile. You'll get a lot of people there. How do you keep it alive afterwards? Because so many things have happened. We go to so many things, there's a lot of talk, and then you never hear again. So how, sort of starting with this initiative, how do you keep it alive and get some action? Which leads on to a second question, and that's about who's the voice of Geelong, but we'll put that aside for a moment. So how do you keep it alive?
That's interesting that you say that about the voice, because I was actually going to go straight into that. I think we may have similar views there. I think the advantage, and I agree that I don't want this to be a talk fest either, and I agree there's plenty of talk fests out there. I think the advantage that our masthead has is that it is a masthead, and it is a very influential masthead still as well. It's, you know, it has a long history, 183 years. It's the second oldest newspaper. It's built up a lot of trust among its readers, and yes, not everyone is always cheering for us, but we are a newspaper as well, so we're not always there to keep everyone happy. But yeah, it's got a really strong stand within the community and outside of this community as well. And I think the fact that, you know, we've been able to get the Deputy Prime Minister and the Premier to come to this event, we still got a lot of pull power. And now it's just really important to make sure that we leverage that influence for the better of this community. The fact that we are a masthead means we've got the ability to campaign publicly. I know a lot of lobbying needs to be done behind the curtains, and we're trying to align our message a lot with some of the groups that are already out there as well, to make sure we speak from one voice. We're not asking for different priorities. That's very important as well. And again, this is why we need to define what we are and what we need. So we speak from a clear voice, but that campaign is not just going to stop with the event on Friday. throughout the year, we will continuously bringing up conversations about the future of Geelong, and we will continuously look for aspects that we need to campaign for. And there can be small things that need to be achieved, but there can also be the big ticket items.
Well, we're the champions of small business, aren't we?
Yeah. So where'd the idea come from? Was it your idea?
No, it's not my idea. I'd like to give credit where credit is due, but it's actually a national initiative from News Corp. We've done it on the Sunshine Coast when I was there as well.
Ah, okay.
And I'm a massive fan of it because I just feel we underestimate how much communities actually need this kind of attention. Even if we don't get proper results, I think one of the biggest things that comes out of it is just creating this optimism and excitement within our community to just be able to be in a room, have a talk fest. One of the benefits that comes out of it is that we just need that little pace breaker, look at what we've achieved, what we are capable of doing, and just be inspired by it too, because that again filters then down to a lot of small businesses. They feel more confident about the decisions they've made about their own businesses, etc., and the accumulation of all of that, hopefully.
I can weave in our tipping point here, Mark, right? Because we always talk about tipping points. But my wish for you and your forum is that this does generate a much louder opportunity for people, and that it will sliding doors tipping point. It can get some momentum going that hasn't got before, because there are diverse groups in Geelong. They all have a reason for being, but this other point I made about is that how do we get that one single message? And Geelong, we're still a village, as we know, and I wish you well with this project, and it could be a tipping point. It could be, yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. There is also good things about diversity too. I mean, yes, we need to speak with one single voice to have a clear message that goes to the right people, but at the same time, we also need to celebrate diversity within our community. So it's not an easy feat, but again, listening and identifying what really matters to the people. I would like to think that the Geelong Advertiser, like one of our main aims every day, is being the voice of the people, and that requires us to listen and make some hard decisions every now and then too. But that's our bread and butter. If we're not the voice of the community, and I love how people say our Eddie quite often when I first came here. That's that sense of ownership that this community has can be a bit of a pain in the back sometimes, because things aren't that easy. But at the same time, we need to value that kind of sentiment, because that means people feel like they own this paper, and that is something that is not easily achieved.
Well, that's why we talk about tribal and all this. You've only got to watch the red and white blue and white jumpers going down to the footy ground on a Saturday to understand what a tribe is, don't you?
Yeah, and hence the Addy gets referred to as the Advertiser, even though he doesn't play anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and our readership numbers still go through the roofs every time we have something Ablet related.
It is
in the
amazing,
paper,
isn't
so some things never go away.
Change. So just coming back to your role, Nadja, so you were editor at Sunshine Coast?
That's correct, yeah.
This is a bigger paper?
Yes.
Yep. So what does an editor do?
Good question. Editing. I think lots of things, really. I guess one of the things that I love about this job as well is the diversity and the challenges that come with it. And a lot of those challenges are driven by people, because you're dealing with so many diverse stakeholders. You've got, obviously, my own management is one stakeholder. I've got my team as a stakeholder. I've got the readers as stakeholders. I've got, the business leaders and politicians and community leaders as stakeholders. There's a lot of...
And your advertisers.
Sorry. Yes. And we love our advertisers. But there's a lot of juggling, obviously, and as hard as that can be sometimes, that's also, I think, a really beautiful challenge, dealing with people. That's like juggling that stakeholder management. The other aspect is obviously driving the news agenda, making sure we always have our finger on the pulse of this community, understanding what is important for this community, And that goes from, you know, the breaking news that happened during the day to the bigger issues, the agenda driving stuff, the campaigns that need to be led. Obviously, you know, you would have probably seen the tragic story of Robert Natoli that is going on. So for us, those things, you know, it's easy to say that's just a news story that comes and goes. But as an editor, I guess it's then your role to say, no, there's a much deeper issue here that we need to keep investigating and keeping on board. So that's probably one of the roles. And then just the typical management stuff, just making sure the stories are readable, everyone knows what they're doing, and the business keeps ticking along. Yeah.
So do you sign off on the front page? Is that part of your role?
Yeah, I work very closely. I have, thankfully, a very good team as well that have been doing front pages for way longer than I have.
Yep.
So I obviously trust them, but I have always input in all of those things. Yeah.
Front and back.
Yes.
The two key pages.
Two key sellers, but yeah.
And where does Nadja see herself going? So in 5 years' time, where do you hope to be?
I kind of stopped.
Running News Corp?
No, not at all. But I stopped thinking about that because what I found in this kind of industry is you make a plan and then it never really happens how you envisaged it. But to be really honest, right in this moment, I'm very happy here. My family is very settled. I've got 2 young kids who've moved around a bit. So I think there's definitely an element where I go, no, they need to stay still a little bit. They're very well established at their school at the moment. And I honestly think, I've probably said that everywhere I went. I do fall in love very quickly with the places and the people where I am, but Geelong does have a lot going for it, and I feel like we are on this cusp of something quite exciting and amazing, and to be part of that is pretty cool.
It's a great place to bring up young kids. I've got 2 young grandkids here. In fact, I've just got a text message while we're talking. Can I pick up Jack at 3:30? And that's the beauty of this place. And what I like about having moved back here after many years, only 7 years ago, is how, particularly with the next generation, they're into sport, they're into everything, and they're not sort of locked into one dimension. They can go in any direction. We're blessed with good schools all over the place. There's just so much to do. And I think hopefully I'm right, it's a safe place to bring up kids. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, I agree. And I must admit, I'm glad that I've brought them back to AFL territory. Queensland was...
Rugby league territory.
It was a bit worrying there for a moment.
That's right.
So Nadja, people know the Addy, but if they wanted to advertise with you or put a death notice in the paper or write to the editor, what's the easiest way of doing that? Via the website? Is that the...
Yeah, we actually have a self-service website for everyday stuff. So that's newsconcierge.com.au. That's very user-friendly, very straightforward. But if any questions, they can always call us up as well. We've got the phone numbers in the paper and online as well. Even when people come through the editorial team, we're always happy to pass people on and get them into the right direction.
Fantastic. So Nadja, thank you. You're absolutely brilliant. I love your backstory and I love what you're doing for Geelong. And I wish you all success.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Nadja, I agree with that wholeheartedly, and this will be a very well listened to podcast. I can assure you of that. Thank you.
Thank you.